Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, July 6th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about a set of brand new morning consult polls that show President Biden narrowing the gap with Donald Trump in key and crucial battleground states. Now, this comes at a time in a very surprising moment where a lot of people on the Democratic side are questioning, does Biden have what it takes to serve out 4 more years as the president they knew him as in 2020 when he ran for office? Should he be faced up against Donald Trump this coming November? And with less than 4 months until the election and less than 2 months until the convention, Democrats are starting to ask where are data points we can look to say that President Biden definitively is not doing better against Donald Trump than he would be if there was another nominee. And so a lot of what we've looked at so far is polling data since the debate. Polling data that shows that President Trump has made an increase in overall support on the net since the debate. Right now, Donald Trump leads by 3.3% on the national average, Joe Biden at 44%, Donald Trump at 48%. It's a pretty substantial lead and one that is unlike anything we have seen in any of the past 2 election cycles. 8 years ago today, Hillary Clinton led Donald Trump by 4.8%, and 4 years ago today, Joe Biden led Donald Trump by 8.7%. But something about this election seems to suggest that not everything is decided at the national level, and battleground states might reveal different results than what some of the national numbers in the head-to-head might be revealing. Now, we knew this at the first part, when the New York Times and many other polling groups and media firms have compiled a lot of what we've seen, a lot of the data points from the past couple of months, put it all together in what they call a tracker. A tracker is essentially watching the polls and looking at how they fluctuate over time. It pretty much just throws everything together, gives us an average, and allows us to analyze elections using it. The New York Times head-to-head between Trump and Biden shows Donald Trump with a 3-point advantage, 47-44, largely in line with what we see on Real Clear Politics. The only problem here is that this 2024 head-to-head matchup between Biden shows a larger lead for Trump than he has in some battleground states. What that means is there are states like Wisconsin where Biden has a slightly better percentage than on the national level, and Trump only leads there by 1, contrary to a 3-point lead nationwide. Michigan shows Trump ahead by 2, contrary with a 3-point lead nationwide. And Pennsylvania shows Trump ahead by 3, in line with a 3-point lead nationwide. Why does this matter? The national average has often been understood as one that leans towards the Democratic Party regardless of who wins the election. In 2000, Al Gore won the presidential popular vote. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the national popular vote. No Republican has won the national popular vote in the 21st century except in the 2004 presidential election. So it is quite surprising when we see data out there that shows Donald Trump with a larger lead nationally than in some battleground states. Because 2020 showed us that every single state here on the map, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, voted quite significantly to the right of what the national popular vote said. For instance, North Carolina has Trump ahead by 5, and yet the national average has Trump ahead by 3. Now, Trump won North Carolina back in 2020, but he won it by about a point, nearly a 6-point swing from the national popular vote. This would be just a 2-point swing. Wisconsin, back in 2020, went to Joe Biden by 0.6%. The national popular vote was Biden plus 4.5%. Nearly a 4-point swing in favor of the Republicans between the national popular vote and the result in Wisconsin. And yet, now we are supposedly taking this and supposed to believe that Donald Trump is doing worse in Wisconsin than he is nationally. And so I encourage you to take a look at these polls with a grain of salt. They provide some direction. Don't get me wrong. The polls absolutely help us understand where the shifts are happening, what the margins are looking like months out from the election. But they can't be entirely right, because some fundamental truths we've known about this election that could be entirely thrown out this coming November. I mean, it happened in 2016, but I feel very much like we are in for a huge polling error in some way. I think we need to keep that in mind. I also do see some merit in taking in these polls because the trend line is what I have been so fascinated with. How are the same group of people responding over time? Clearly, this isn't good for for President Biden. Seeing a decrease in support over time isn't strong. But am I supposed to believe that Joe Biden will only receive 44% of the national popular vote? No. Do I believe that Donald Trump will only receive 47% of the national popular vote? It happened in 2020, but I don't think it's happening in 2024. I think we're going to see a slightly higher percentage here. I am interested by the margin and the way that things change over time. Where was it a month ago amongst the same group of people? Where was it 2 months ago amongst the same group of people, the same demographic groups, the same electorate? That's what's interesting to me. But on the overall net, I don't know how much I believe that Donald Trump is running ahead of Biden by far more than in Wisconsin or Michigan on the national level, because that really doesn't make that much sense. Which is where I direct you now to this new set of polling from the Morning Consult that shows pretty much direct opposition to what we've seen on the national level. And in a way, I encourage you to take this all in together. That the polls can be telling us one thing, but reality may be grounded entirely somewhere else. But now we're starting to see the polls conflict. On one end, for a while, since the debate, it has been pretty much hammering in Biden. Trump +6 in the New York Times, Trump +6 in the Wall Street Journal, Trump +2 on CBS News, tied in Reuters and Ipsos. Not the best result for the incumbent president. And so we took all that and said, pretty much everything is trending in the direction of Trump. With very, very few exceptions, a few Biden shifts since the debate, but still largely in favor of Trump. But now we're getting our first concrete look at swing state battleground polls that show us something again that may not fit this national narrative, may not fit this conversation around whether Kamala Harris would be better than Biden, may not fit a lot of the conversation that the mainstream media is having right now. But it does show results that the Biden campaign probably is a bit relieved to hear. The new Morning Consult poll shows in all swing states that they surveyed, from Arizona through Wisconsin, all on your screen right now, that Trump leads on average by 2 points. At face value, this is not a winning electoral map. It's not one in which Biden can win the election off of, but does show areas for improvement and where we've seen gains in support for President Biden since the debate. Now, it might be surprising. It might be quite surprising, rather, is what I meant to say, seeing an increase in support of some of these battleground states. Michigan, I'm closely looking at, showing Biden ahead by 5 in a head-to-head matchup. Wisconsin, I'm looking at, which had Trump ahead in the last poll for Morning Consult, now has Biden ahead by 3. I'm also looking at polls like Pennsylvania that had a neck-and-neck race. All of a sudden, Trump is ahead by 7 points. But the result here is clear. Biden performs the best he ever has in these swing state polls somehow after the debate. And if this isn't further proof that polling isn't a perfect science, I don't know what is. Now, what I'm more focused on here isn't that I believe Biden will win by 5 in Michigan, or that Trump will win in Pennsylvania by 7. Both of those things cannot happen at the same time, which is why I would say on the overall margins here, I'm not as impressed. What I am more impressed by for the Biden campaign is that they have been able to narrow up the same groups of voters that answer these surveys from the Morning Consult and Bloomberg News. I'm interested in states like Arizona, where they were able to find that the margin here reduced for Trump in the state. Sure, Trump is still ahead, but Biden has made a roughly 1 to 2 point gain in support. In Georgia, from being down by 3 to being down by 1. Nevada got worse for Democrats. Pennsylvania got worse for Democrats. That is not a good sign for President Biden. But a good sign nonetheless in North Carolina, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Georgia, in Arizona, in parts of the country where Biden could just slam dunk through Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. 2 out of the 3 there are trending in the right way for the Democratic campaign. And so, all in all, these polls here show Biden doing well in Wisconsin, doing well in Michigan. Is that enough to win? The answer is no. If we were to apply the map as is right now, this is my most recent election prediction, flipping over Michigan, flipping over Wisconsin, no, it is not enough. But what would be enough is the state of Pennsylvania, with its 19 electoral votes that would President Biden to 270 to Donald Trump's 268. 270 to 268. Now, if Donald Trump is actually ahead by 7 points in Pennsylvania, that's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. Democrats would have to find another way to get around that. Maybe Georgia, which has Trump ahead by a point. Maybe Arizona, which has Trump ahead by 3 points. That could be the only feasible pathway to a Biden reelect if there was to be a scenario in which Pennsylvania was, in fact, Trump plus 7. But the results here contradict a lot of the mainstream media narrative that the Biden campaign is somehow doomed to fail from the beginning, and that Kamala Harris should take on the role as the nominee here and take over for President Biden. Well, as this reminder might show you, We are 122 days out from the election. And so 538 decided to run a question here. Does Kamala Harris have a better chance of the presidency than President Biden this November? Does Vice President Harris stand to serve as a better nominee for the National Democratic Party? And here's what they find. With everything included, incumbency factor, economic factors, other non-polling factors, including polling factors, Biden overall has better odds than Vice President Harris. The win probability in Arizona goes from 41 to 23 between Biden and Harris. In Georgia, 37 to 24. Democrats go from being the favorite in Michigan to losing the state, from 43% to 35% chance of victory in Nevada, from being the favorites in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin to having just a quarter of a chance, quarter of a percentage there, chance at victory, 25%, 27% chance at victory. This is a problem here for national Democrats, that if Kamala Harris was in fact to replace President Biden on this ticket here, that there would be a problem, because the numbers show, at least if you trust 538, because a lot of us do when it comes down to this head-to-head forecast here, when it comes down to what they are saying, Biden has an overall better chance at victory in the 2024 presidential election with all factors included. And while it may not seem like that right now, that's what the data shows. The data also shows that Biden is still in the running for president of the United States. It may not be looking too hot because, again, these polling swing state responses from the Morning Consult and Bloomberg News show Biden losing the election overall. But it does not show it without a possibility of turning around. It does not show it without the possibility of Democrats going back to being in the advantage point. Pennsylvania is the only state that broke 50% on the map here. Neither of the two candidates have, which means there's quite some room to grow on both sides of the aisle. And Democrats are the party that needs to grow the most, and they have the ability to do so. Michigan, Wisconsin should show exactly why the Biden campaign is so adamant he needs to stay in the race. Why Joe Biden himself believes at the core of his heart that he is the one who beats President Trump. Because some of these polls here do suggest that is in fact the case. And the 538 forecast reaffirms what the campaign seems to understand is that Biden has overall better odds than Harris. As much as she is someone who probably would win any and all debates against President Trump, it also comes down to a question of likability, favorability, public perception. Kamala Harris has, in many cases, been perceived as a lower, having a lower approval rating than President Biden. When it comes down to Kamala Harris in terms of appeal nationwide, she would need to be balanced as someone who came into the 2020 race championing her progressive record. Previously, someone who publicly supported Medicare for All and the Green New Deal. Kamala Harris would be perceived as far more left-wing than President Biden, and that's something that she would need to combat. And I'm not saying the campaign can't do it should she decide to move up to the nomination spot and should she be replacing President Biden at the top of the ticket. But it also comes into consideration that maybe, just maybe, President Biden, as someone who won the election back in 2020, can also win this election in 2024. These polls here, I think, put that big halt into this mainstream media narrative that Biden is somehow completely collapsed and there is no pathway to victory, because these polls were taken after the debate. These polls were taken amongst the general populace in these battleground states. And for Biden to be performing the best he ever has been in the entirety of this election, according to the tracker from Bloomberg News and Morning Consult, is something that cannot be ignored. Is it an anomaly? It may be. I don't know if I buy the narrative that all polls that show Biden doing better is an anomaly. Do I think that it stands in contradiction with a lot of the polls that we've been seeing too? Yes, which is why I say we need to take them all with a grain of salt and that they don't always reveal the actual results. Equally to the presidential head-to-head matchup on the general election front for the national, I don't think that Biden's only going to get 45% in Nevada and that Trump will only get 43% in Michigan. That's not going to happen. We are going to see some narrowing up. We are going to see some tighter margins, but the polls show changes amongst existing electorates that were more amenable to Donald Trump in the past, that were more willing to back Trump months ago, and they are becoming less and less willing. And the question of why that is, I don't know, because clearly that debate was not a victory for President Biden, and everybody knows it, including the president himself. But that doesn't mean that swing state voters only take into account one 90-minute debate when they have a very long time to gauge, and a lot extending beyond the fact that President Biden is in fact an 81-year-old man to consider in weighing their options for the 2024 presidential race. And so this brand new poll from Morning Consult isn't the end-all be-all, it isn't the gold standard when it comes down to polling data, but it does provide some insight. A unique piece of insight that does stand in direct contrast with a lot of what we've been seeing from the mainstream media. But sometimes that's how these things work. American politics is weird, and the way that voters vote sometimes can also be weird. But it doesn't mean that these things cannot be foreseen. There's a reason why 538 is adamant that Biden has overall better odds than Kamala Harris. Should this change, the narrative will change. But right now it looks like the campaign knows it, President Biden knows it, Vice President Harris knows it, the pundits know it too, and the only real people who are pushing this idea that it's going to be Harris overall better are members of the Democratic circle, not necessarily those who are close to the data, who are close to the analytics, and also the mainstream media pundits, the correspondents, the op-ed writers, the people in the New York Times, and CNN and MSNBC. There's a lot to think about on the Democratic Party side, but these new polls don't make it easier for President Biden to depart from the race, and in fact, reaffirm a lot of what the Biden campaign has been trying to argue thus far, is that he will rebound, and he will go on to win this election, and it's a question of when, not if. And right now, these polls seem to suggest that that was the confidence that was necessary, and the approach that was necessary to get President Biden through this run, through these next couple weeks especially if more data comes out that either affirms this or contradicts this. We'll see. We'll have to wait and see. Overall, though, President Biden, good numbers for him in some of these battleground states, good trend lines here too, ones that could suggest that, in fact, come November, President Biden could be reelected. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.